Hey everyone, this is Pilot and welcome back to yet another episode of Bionicle Moc Showcase. Today we'll be taking a look at my latest creation, Nehrua the Precursor. This will be an interesting one, as unlike last time when we covered Toa Helryx, Nehrua is an entirely original character. This gave me a lot of freedom when it came to Nehruas Design, which I plan to explain in full throughout this video. As is the case with all my mocks, Nehrua has been created as part of my fan project Bionicle Origin 1. The goal of this project is to take the existing Bionicle story and reimagine it through my own creative lens. First and foremost, Nehrua has always existed as a piece of this story, which in turn became the primary inspiration for their design as a mock. If you're curious, more information on Nehrua's story and Bionicle Origin 1 as a whole can be found in the respective topics on the TTV message boards. Links to both are available in the description below. There you will also find a link to join my Discord, where you can interact with other Bionicle fans and participate in monthly Bionicle mock contests. A new mock contest for the month of April is just about to kick off, so now's the perfect time to join in on the action. Lastly, if you wind up enjoying this episode of Bionicle Moc Showcase, then consider leaving it a like and subscribing if you haven't already. The channel is closing in on 2,000 subscribers, and any help in getting it there would be greatly appreciated. Now without further ado, let's begin. The way I go about showcasing my Bionicle creations is by explaining the design process behind them, and for Nehrua that begins with their story. Unlike some mockers who will create a mock and incorporate it into their story later on, I usually start with a character's story already in mind, and then craft a mock to represent them. As such, in order to understand Nehruas Design, you first will need to learn the gist of who they are. So here's an abridged explanation of Nehruas backstory. Again, if you want to learn the full story of Nehrua, there's a link in the description to go check it out. Billions of years ago, Nehrua would come into being as part of a species known as the Ouroboros. These Ouroboros were essentially gods with the ability to alter existence itself. From the formation of new worlds to the creation of diverse sentient life, nothing was impossible for these creatures. At first, Nehrua was naive to all the power they had at their disposal. However, in time, Nehrua would experiment until eventually learning all that they were capable of. Using this knowledge, Nehrua would create the dimension we know today as the Origin 1 universe. This would become Nehrua's greatest achievement, as Origin 1 was now the catalyst for many more universes to come about, including the Prime universe we all know and love. Though this came at a severe cost to Nehrua themselves. Nehrua's abilities, while extremely powerful, are so strong that they slowly eat away at their body and spirit until eventually killing them. Making use of these powers only furthers this issue, so as you can imagine, the creation of the Origin 1 universe had a heavy toll on Nehrua. Before, Nehrua had been able to simply neglect this aspect of their abilities, but now their time was running out. When the Origin 1 universe was first created, it also became populated by a multitude of species, which Nehrua would begin to study. Their hope was to find a species capable of inheriting Nehrua's legacy, that being their power, ensuring it wasn't lost to time. This would be Nehrua's goal from here on, searching for the perfect inheritors while slowly succumbing to the cold clutches of death. All this would become the primary inspiration for Nehrua's design as a mock, but what specific aspects of this backstory was I looking to include in the build? Well, since Bionicle mocks function as a visual medium, it was important that Nehrua was given an appearance that made sense with their story. This was also one of the main design pillars I outlined in my previous mock showcase for Toa Helryx. It's one of the biggest factors I consider when building any mock for my story, so I tried to pick out details that might hint at Nehrua's appearance. Those were, number 1, Nehrua is alien. Being an Ouroboros, Nehrua is part of a completely new species, separate from anything we've seen from Bionicle previously. As such, they needed to have a unique look that fits their cosmic origins. Number 2, Nehrua is ancient. Having been born alongside existence itself, Nehrua's lifespan extends into the billions, if not more. When we meet them, Nehrua is in the final stages of their life cycle, so it makes sense to convey that through their design. And finally, number 3, Nehrua is frail and damaged. The nature of Nehrua's power is perhaps the most important aspect of their character, as is their primary motivation throughout the story. The creation of the Origin 1 universe left Nehrua in a severely weakened state, and that needed to be consistent with the mock design. In addition, I also looked to outside sources for ideas I could incorporate into Nehruas Build. Specifically, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild had a large impact on Nehrua's design. In Zelda, the open world is populated by ancient shrines that contain challenges for the player to overcome. At the end of each shrine, you'll encounter a Sheikah monk who gives you with an item called a Spirit Orb that can then be exchanged for more health or increased stamina. These Sheikah monks are an aspect of the game that I took great inspiration from. Not only are they frail and look ancient, but also the concept of a monk is one completely foreign to Bionicle. Sure, you had spiritual characters like the Turaga, but I personally would describe them more as village elders or chieftains. It was clear that a design similar to the Sheikah monks would work perfectly for Nehrua, and I now had a clear vision of what I wanted to create. All that was left to do was build the mock itself. Here we have it, Nehrua the Precursor. To give some general info about the Moc, Nehrua stands at about 12 inches tall and has a total piece count of 484. Assuming studio's measurements are accurate, this makes Nehrua one of my largest Mocs in terms of size. This was required to achieve the look I'd envisioned for this model. Speaking of, let's examine how each of my ideas from before got incorporated into the build. First, let's circle back to the Sheikah monks from Zelda. Their design had a heavy influence on Nehrua's final appearance, and I'm sure you can see that resemblance right off the bat. For one, when creating Nehrua's head design, I was inspired to give them a hat alongside a mostly featureless face. This is supposed to mimic the veils that Sheikah wear over their faces, the Sheikah eye symbol being their only distinguishing feature. In addition, the Sheikah also inspired the frail, almost skeletal look of Nehrua's body. Since the Sheikah monks have been locked away in their shrines for so long, their bodies have started to decay. I decided to include this aspect of their design on Nehrua, since it matches perfectly with their backstory. This leads us to talk about the other aesthetics I wanted to include: alien, ancient, and frail. These three traits were all inspired by Nehrua's lore, so for the Moc to work as an accurate representation of this character, it was imperative these details got included. As I mentioned previously, Nehrua's ancient look was accomplished by looking to outside sources for further inspiration. The Sheikah monks presented concepts entirely foreign to the Bionicle universe, which makes Nehrua feel different from your typical Toa or Matoran. To really carry this concept home, I also gave Nehrua 3 eyes to make them appear less humanoid. As people, we're used to seeing things with 2 eyes, so by differentiating Nehrua with a 3rd eye, you don't connect to them in quite the same way. Next is Ancient. I used Nehrua's color scheme as a means of accomplishing this goal. Aside from the glowing colors, Nehrua is mostly comprised of different shades of gray, making them appear like a living statue carved from stone. I should also note that this contrasts very nicely against the brighter glowing colors on Nehrua, which are meant to convey the power they possess. And finally we have Nehrua's frailty. I achieved this by keeping Nehrua's limb design simple. For the most part, they're simply technic axles with tubes covering them, which makes Nehrua look unnaturally thin. I also adopted a skeletal look for the torso, giving Nehrua exposed limbs and a cavity in their abdomen that I created using a Zamra launcher. I am particularly proud of this part's usage, as it's often a difficult piece to use in any meaningful way. Clearly I accomplished pretty much all the goals I set out to achieve. Nehrua has been given an appearance that fits their backstory, and I was able to implement some interesting techniques in the process. I already mentioned the Zamra launcher in Nehrua's torso, but their custom head design, specifically Nehrua's hat, gives this Moc a lot more character as well. However, while I am happy with the model overall, there are a few potential issues I'd like to highlight. For one, Nehrua's color scheme could be considered messy, given the multitude of glowing colors I used in the build. This plays into Nehrua's lore, with some colors representing their aspects of virtue, tools Nehrua once used to evaluate the species they came across. I like the idea I was going for, but I may adjust the amount of each color so they clash less. And second are the feet, which frankly are just boring. I had initially planned to give Nehrua a custom foot design, complete with toes that could articulate. I think this would have helped to further emphasize the monk look, but I just couldn't think of a way to go about it, so I went with an official foot piece instead. I feel like this was really a missed opportunity, so at some point I may go back and rework the feet to what I had initially envisioned. So, Nehrua. To get my final thoughts, building this Moc was a very liberating experience. For a while now, a lot of my Mocs have been recreations of characters or species that already exist in Bionicle, and Nehrua was a nice opportunity to break out of that bubble. As I mentioned at the start of this video, Nehrua is fully a product of my own mind, and it was cool seeing my vision slowly realized as I built. It goes to show that while Matoran and Toa are fun to build, challenging yourself with something new can be a very entertaining experience. That's going to be all from me, so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on Nehrua. Are there any specific parts of the Moc that stick out to you, or is there something you think could be improved? Either way, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. Lastly, for those who want to see more of Nehrua, I'd like to give one last plug to their lore entry. This explains Nehrua's backstory in full, beyond just the brief synopsis I included at the start of this video. In addition, it also covers other aspects of Nehrua's lore, and is where you can find instructions if you want to recreate this Moc yourself. A link can be found in the description below. Thanks for watching this episode of Bionicle Moc Showcase, and this is Pilot, signing off.